o'clock, so if you all join me and people like Jen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You two guys missed the first two lines.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah,
I thought that was proposed.
I guess we'll go to the first privilege of the floor. Sir, we had to start without you because it was 9. You're fine. Actually, you have someone online. Did you want to speak on privilege of the floor?
Hi, yep, that's why I'm here.
Okay, please,
Hi, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Yes.
I didn't know if you were gonna give me an etiquette reminder.
No, I wasn't. You look like you had pretty good adequate manners on the get
Well,
go.
thank you. Hi, I'm Jeanette Detweiler. I'm coming to you with a proposal to please update the cell tower laws. It's come to my and my neighbor's attention because there's the Yerke site proposal, just that they're currently inadequate. There are consultants that you can hire to do this, and also we've looked up, there's 2 pages right now that you have, and usually in an updated one it's about 40 pages. Or you can look at Woodstock, New York actually uses the same E-code that you have if you want to look at an example of an updated one. Yeah, and the municipalities have basically all the power here. So we would just like you to protect your citizens by updating it.
Thank you, and we will put that on the docket to review and see what we have. It sounds like we need to have more pieces of paper on ours than we currently have, it sounds like, so.
Yeah.
We will do that. Thank you for weighing in.
Yeah, oh, sorry, and also you'll be able to hear my neighbors and I at the planning board meeting on the 26th.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I'll take this opportunity to mention that you told me that we would have review of 900-foot detached garages on our agenda for this month. And it is so noted in the meeting minutes of October 21st, and it's not on the agenda today.
I must have omitted that, John. I'm sorry. I don't know if we can wrangle that in at the end or not, but I'm willing to do that. And then if not, we'll get it on the agenda for next month.
Thank you.
So, can you say the first part again? 900 foot?
We voted, I want to say 3 meetings ago to approve detached garages in excess of 900 square foot.
Oh, 900.
And all the other zoning areas besides the RLD. We excluded the RLD, and Jared said that we would address that in one of these meetings.
And we can throw that on right away if you would for the next meeting. Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Did you want to speak the privilege of the floor?
Yeah, just one quick question.
Go ahead.
So I've been busy with other things for the last 6 months. And I've been trying to follow the ADUs. And I just offer this up as a suggestion. Okay? I may have talked to John a little bit about this one, I'm not sure. But so I believe that ADU is a great thing for our community from a letting the younger generation or the older generation, enjoy this community as much as they can. And what I'm a little discouraged about is that it sounds like they all have to be attached. And that attachment, let me personally speak to it, okay? So when my daughter came home from Beirut, Lebanon, with her husband, and then she delivered a baby a couple months later. So we put him in our house, okay? Not a lot of joy when you got multiple generations, 3 generations there, right? So I think it's fine if you want to limit the square footage to some number in a subdivision kind of position, or 3/4 of an acre or an acre. But if you got 5 or 10 or 50 acres, I don't see why we can't have an accessory dwelling unit that is commensurate and not to be attached. That's the biggest thing. It's not square footage necessarily, it's attachment. I just think it's an opportunity that will make this community better. Stop there. So if I missed too much of it already, or is it in
We haven't really hit on that. I think we kind of let that go by the by. We can certainly revisit that again as well. So, yeah.
Is there a document out that, is it draft still, or is it
There's nothing in draft right now.
nothing in draft yet?
Right.
So we got time still.
Right,
Okay,
right.
all right, that's fine.
Yeah, we haven't really addressed that, so we can certainly look at that. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? The other privileges of the floor? Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
Were there any additions or corrections?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
On to floodplain, once again.
All right. So I sent out two versions of the final draft for the floodplain ordinance. Chris Nadler and I reviewed absolutely everything in response to DEC's comment about seeking code council approval for a more restrictive standard. So we created two versions. Version one is the exact same as we had at the last meeting. And version two is what we believe would not require code council approval or New York State approval to be more restrictive than New York State Uniform Code. The difference, after again reviewing countless sections of code, is we would change our definition, our proposed definition of a substantial improvement or damage from what is proposed as 45% of the market value of the structures to 50%. And that is what we currently have, and that's what New York State has within its code. To give some clarification on that, what that means is that if we have a non-compliant structure, which is any structure that doesn't have 2 feet of freeboard or any of the other applicable standards, once they do anything to that structure, and it could be new kitchen floors, new kitchen cabinets, new fixtures, a new appliance, even down to siding, and the cost of that improvement reaches 50% of the market value of the structure, not of the parcel combined, just that structure, the structure will need to come into compliance with the current floodplain standard. We propose dropping that down from 50 to 45, purely on the basis that 50%, while it's a great number, our market values for our houses are sometimes 1.5 million. And so we do have quite a few non-compliant structures. And we wanted to start kind of incrementally lowering that threshold so that we create more compliant structures throughout the community and therefore more resilience.
Is there a chance that could encourage more taking down of older homes in the lakefront area as opposed and rebuilding entirely as opposed to restoring?
It would. Now, there is a distinction for historical structures. And that is state historical as well as national. They would not have to.
And that's starting at what, 50 years or older?
I believe so. They have to be registered. I know that section is. So I haven't handled any of those, so I wouldn't.
So that wouldn't count for any of the things that we've identified in our historic structures. It would just be on the National Register.
Yeah.
So, and the issue with that is having a non-compliant structure, not only the cons for the homeowner, it increases their flood insurance premiums by sometimes double, sometimes triple. But it also puts us at risk for having residents within a structure that is at substantial risk for damage. So, again, our reason for it was trying to drop it down. Now, we did make a change. We don't believe that this is more restrictive than New York State standard. Currently, as written, our ordinance is one improvement or damage event at that time is taken into the calculation. So what we see quite often is I'm going to go through and I'm going to do this project this month. Next month, I'm going to get a permit for that project and then so on and so forth. So we did change both proposals to put a 2-year cap on it. So we will go back and look at 2 years worth of history for either damages or improvements. And that's so that people don't get around
So how would we know improvements that aren't requiring permits, like switching out appliances, for example,
Because you need a permit for them. If you're in the floodplain, you have to get a flood development permit.
just to switch out your appliances?
So, and that's part of our initiative for next year. We have compiled a list with help from Ontario County of every single parcel that's within the floodplain. And I really want to shout out to Ontario County and Jared for helping us with that, because otherwise we were gonna go through Encore and click.
How many parcels are there?
Just,
Roughly.
so within the 1%, we're looking at around 400 parcels. When we take into the 1% and the 0.2%, which is the 500-year floodplain, we're looking at just under 1,000.
So basically lining the lake and a few other areas?
Quite a few other areas now, because these are the new flood maps that we went through, so we weren't doing it twice. And we grew substantially. We are, Monarch County has us beat with the Lake Shore, for Lake Ontario, but we are the single community with the largest number of parcels, or largest amount of parcels in the floodplain of Ontario.
I'm really concerned though about anything that encourages destroying older homes along the lake shore. We've been doing that all along. I would like to encourage preservation of older homes along the lake shore. So I don't know if there's any adjustment that can be made for homes that are older than 50 years old that have all been identified already in our town. So
Unfortunately not, because that's a FEMA regulation,
Mhm.
so no matter what, we'd still have to do the 50%.
Yeah.
We can't go any less restricted than that, otherwise we lose NFIP coverage, so. We can keep it at 50 if that's the consensus. Obviously, we strive for resiliency and protection, so that's where we go at it. We have seen quite a few where they go through, they get hit, and especially over this past year, we've had 2 structures, and it's just gonna keep happening, unfortunately, these streams and how they're acting there, so. The 100-year storm, we don't try not to call it a 100-year storm anymore, because it's a 1% annual chance. We did have someone, they said, well, I got flooded last year. I'm good. Well, you're not. I can tell you, I got one property that got 4 times this year and it constantly went through. So that's really where we're coming.
I would personally feel more comfortable with it at 50 unless there was something that we could indicate with houses that were 50 years or older. Just because of wanting to preserve historic properties along the lake. So I understand
I wonder what effect 45 versus 50 would have on that. I think if you're, you know what I mean, I'm not sure that's a huge.
Yeah, it's not a huge deal. I mean, ultimately, I'll be fully honest, my goal as an apartment and floodplain staff for the town is to drop it down to around 35%. Because the fact that our code's been on the book since 1977. And we're looking at structures that now are over that 50%, theoretically should be. And ultimately, it's not only costing property owners a lot of money to not have a non-compliant structure, it also hinders our ability to provide discounts to the rest of the town. So being that 50% is the FEMA minimum, if we started dropping that number, we would get points from FEMA towards what's called CRS or community resiliency, something. So for instance, the city is a part of CRS and they receive a 10% discount town-wide on their NFIP premiums.
Is there not a way that we can put in a historic structure? I mean, that's.
Unfortunately not. They can always seek a variance. We do have that within the policy. And they would just have to find other means of protecting the structure. It's just because that minimum is the 50%, it's clearly outlined. It's really tough to get around.
Well, I mean, if it were at 45, is there not a way that we could indicate unless they were identified as an historic structure?
No, because it has to be a historic structure as defined by FEMA, which would be that national or excuse me, as defined by DEC, so it would be national or state.
The registry. Yes, all right. We only have 2 properties.
Right.
So it's not just tearing down, they could raise the foundation. It's just, the biggest one that we see is they don't need 2 feet of So they're built within the floodplain elevation or below 2 foot of freeboard. And so they would have to either raise the structure or demolish and then raise.
Yep.
So
You use the term, we are at risk, we the town. What do you mean by risk? What's, I would think the homeowners at risk.
So we're at risk because it puts not so much liability or financial risk on the town, but ultimately we do have a service that we need to provide to residents. So if they are within a flood zone, then we have to provide emergency services. Sometimes emergency housing and sheltering. We have to,
That's the risk.
yep, that's the risk.
You didn't create the conditions.
Nope. No, it's more of the response risk in the sense of we're trying to help these folks. And when you have a property that's a continuing issue. For instance, we have 3 properties right now that FEMA declares as substantially non-compliant and at risk of losing coverage, which means they have had 3 or more claims on their flood insurance within 10 years that account for more than $20,000. Once you hit that threshold, you're at risk of losing the flood insurance for them.
Who's you? You just use the term, you're at risk. I can see that,
property.
the homeowner, okay,
Yep, the
that's,
property.
you make, you, the homeowner, make a conscious choice. You buy a house in a flood zone, you're generally, if you've got a mortgage, your bank's gonna tell you that. In other words, the municipality didn't create that condition.
It didn't, but the municipality has to deal with the side effects.
Yeah.
And it could be,
It's a burden on the municipality.
yep, and it's also a burden on neighboring properties. So for instance, the biggest one is we have several garages within Sandy Beach area that are not compliant. If we do see an inundation of floodwaters, those will be wiped out. There's no doubt about it. And they'll be stripped from the foundations. And then you have debris management, you have hazardous materials that you're trying to go through and contain. It can create a long-term effect that's not just a 24-hour emergency response of trying to save property and people. We could see damage to compliant structures from a non-compliant structure.
It's not a life safety issue if a garage floats away.
If you're in the garage, it would be.
If you're in the water and
You
get
had to swim. And another question, Adeline used the term historic structures. 50 years doesn't
We,
sound like historic to me.
well, we've identified, we've already had an historic
Yeah.
committee that has identified all of the structures that are 50 years or older within the community. So for example, Notre Dame, for example, would be a historic structure now, but sorry that it's historic is 50-year plus. I'm also historic.
I mean, I live in a house that's older than 50 years, sure as hell is not
It's
historic.
just the
Yeah.
standard, like the Landmark Society and
Yes.
those
Okay.
things like that, that's what they use. So
Yeah.
when they did our historical survey, that was their basis.
Their
That
start.
was the standard.
Seems like a misuse of the term, but
I think
I'll go with
it's
the
hard
flow.
for us to
That's where
think
it
of
is.
those things as historic, but as we go forward in years, history gets closer.
Yeah.
So to bring this back, so what's the negative to go from 45 to 50? I mean,
Exactly what I
It's
just
the
said.
value.
no, I mean, we run the risk of some of these places being
Torn down.
brought into compliance with floodplain. I mean, there's 2 sides to that. I mean, I live in an old home
Yeah.
and I like to see, I think that's why a lot of the community likes these older homes, but we can't keep running the risk of these structures that are there. In my mind, if the town's goal is 35 and we stay at 50, are we moving towards the right goal or are we just kind of status quo?
So we were trying to go through and bring it down in increments, that way as to not
Right.
grow up.
Right.
Ultimately, again, like I said, we'd really like to go down to 35. But we saw that as such a huge step, especially people could be planning projects, you could be planning a renovation. We just had 2 projects this past summer that we had to deny because it was either, hey, raise the house or tear it down, and when push came to shove, they said, yeah, no, I can't do it. So,
Yeah, I gotta say that, I'm opposed to this modification because it puts the burden on the homeowners. Just like you said, you just denied 2 people from wanting to make their living situation more comfortable. because we're trying to reduce the number of non-compliant homes. Well, if we gotta do that by either raising the home or razzing the home, it just seems punitive, and I don't like it. And I don't like to look back at 2 years either.
So how do we change these houses that are in the floodplain that are not compliant, that are being damaged continuously?
Well, I think if it's being damaged and it needs to be rebuilt because of that damage, then I think it should be rebuilt to proper codes and ordinances. But if it's not, and it's been living that way for ever, I don't think because somebody wants to go and put an addition on it or change their appliances or change their floors, we ought to make them either take the house down or raise it. It just seems very punitive to me.
So appliances are one thing, but adding on to a structure that's already in a floodplain doesn't seem to make sense to me.
But we allow homes in other non-compliant situations, put additions on their home. So to say, just because you're in the floodplain, you can't do it, I think is not equitable.
But I think that's the most risky area though.
It is, absolutely.
Absolutely, but I remember back in the 70s when all of Titchener Point flooded. I mean, it just, I just don't think it's equitable or fair. And the reality is we're making the homeowner do this, right? So the burden of responsibility, both in terms of what they have to do after their home is damaged and what they have to do just because they want to improve their quality of life, all falls in his burden on the homeowner. And I just don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair. And particularly if we set a lower threshold, lower than 50% improvements, to tell them that they can't do the improvements because they're in the floodplain and they're either gonna have to tear it down or raise it, I think is just unfair to people. They bought that house, and I think Tom said this when we first started this conversation, they bought that house knowing their situation. And they're willing to bear that risk. And I think if they're willing to bear that risk, then so be it.
I would rather, I mean, I don't know, I would assume right now, if you want to build a new home in a floodplain, that you have to apply for the ordinance or a variance with the zoning board. I would love if the zoning board would deny variances for new homes in floodplains,
Well,
but
I do think though,
that's-
Adeline, to add to that if they're going to build a new home in a floodplain, it does have to meet the code.
or have it meet the code completely.
It does have to meet the
Yeah.
code now.
For sure.
So-
But I don't think
and
that
that's-
always happens. I mean, I know there's been some already that have had variances for,
Not for the 2-foot floodplain.
so.
There have been none for the 2-foot floodplain that I'm aware of.
No, the town hasn't issued any variances for family.
Yeah, everyone that has
What
been.
about Menteith there? That's on a delta.
No, that was outside of the floodplain. He raised the house.
Right,
And that I agree with. I'm
right.
completely on board with that. If you're building that floodplain as of now, I believe it should be 2 foot above the floodplain, and we ought to build per code and ordinance, but
Terry, do you have an opinion?
Well, talking about this difference between 50 and 45, and how many houses, you said there are 1,000,
Just now, that would be affected by that, so 24.
but if we make change like this, how many of those houses are in the lake area versus how many are by
About
streams or?
25 to 40%.
So almost half are lake, affected by the lake.
The issue with lowering this now is not so much about properties that have been in the floodplain for their entirety. It's the properties that are now being identified within the new
With the new
floodplains
map.
where they're not compliant, and we're gonna see that number of non-compliant structures skyrocket when those become effective.
So in that lake area, I think, I don't know if this is a true statement or not, but frequently the total value of land and structures are a smaller part of that value if there's any lakeshore.
Sometimes,
Or
Not frequently.
50%.
Sometimes
Usually,
yeah, 50, 45, close, you know. So, but outside that area, usually the structure is going to be the dominant value of that total package, so. It seemed to me that as you look at making those changes, interior changes or addition being put on, that the difference between 45 and 50 isn't gonna be all that great for something like that. I mean, if it was $1 million, it'd be a $40,000 or $50,000 difference, so. You know, if it's $500,000, it's half of that, so it's pretty close, but to encourage the compliance, lowering it to 45, there's no problem with it.
Jared?
I just worry about those that are not, so those homes that are coming in. So now we have homes that now suddenly are in a floodplain because of the new map. And now you say you want to do something, say you have plans and want to renovate. Now you're stuck by no fault of your own, by a FEMA map that was drawn, that they serve a purpose, but it was drawn by an outside party. Now you're affected by this overreach and this, not overreach, but this new requirement that you did not buy into. So, I mean, again, I think it comes down to the choice of the property owner. In my mind,
So with those new maps, they're gonna be susceptible to 50%, so we're talking 45 or 50, that's what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Those people are all gonna be have 50% as their
because of the new
threshold,
law.
as their threshold, right?
Mhm.
So if the town feels that we should move towards 35%, do we keep it at 50 or do we try to move it down? That's the question.
I think there's already a big change happening with the new properties added to the floodplain. And making that also then go down another 5% makes an even bigger change, which is probably why you asked for 45 instead of 35, so.
And I guess I'd question whether the town wants it to go back to 35%, go down to 35%. I don't.
I mean, it's the thing, I mean, like you said, it's safety, it's straight up safety versus property rights, I mean, essentially is what it comes down to. So it's trying to find a balance between those two things.
And I think Jared's bringing up a very good point, one that I was gonna bring up also, that, we got people that are being surprised by this new FEMA map.
Yeah.
They're being told all of a sudden that they're in the floodplain, and because they're in the floodplain, if they want to do an addition or modification of their home, they can't do it if it's over 45% or 50% or soon to be 35%, because they were surprised by this.
Well, it sounds to me like there's 3 people that are saying keeping it at 50. I'm fine with 45. Sounds like Terry doesn't care either way.
45 is fine with me.
Yeah, but
I would
I
think,
think we're the
the thing
minority.
that Mike brought up about the liability for the town, well, not for the structure, the services that may have to be provided. Why should we be on the hook to provide those services? When somebody makes a personal decision to do something in that house. I don't think we should be.
Well, we're always on the hook for rescue services and fire
I'm not
services.
talking about that.
But cleaning up the debris from something to get washed out is gonna be, it's gonna go somewhere into the lake, right? Potentially.
So I mean, the prime example would be July 9th, unfortunately. All the homes surrounding Sucker Brook. Any home that is directly next to it, parcel next to it, within the city limits. It's a very large difference, but they should not be there. They're within what's called the floodway, and that's where you have a substantial amount of force moving through there. That's the true center body of the stream.
I think the reality is, Mike, and I don't mean to be interrupting, and I apologize if I am. Reality is, if we're gonna have a flood incident like we had, I don't think whether somebody puts an addition on their house or don't put an addition on their house is gonna make one iota bit of difference here. We're still gonna have emergency services and we're gonna have emergency needs that we're gonna have to address, not because a person put a new floor in their kitchen or renovated the interior of their homes or, so I think it's a stretch to say that we're gonna increase the services because somebody wanted to do a renovation on their house.
And just to not go back and forth with you on that one, but Happiness House is my prime example for this one. Happiness House is below the flood elevation of the new maps. Happiness House should, in its right, because they're not within the current effective maps. Having this house should be raised. It can be done, but it's a substantial amount of residents below the floodplain that were severely affected by the flooding on Lime.
So why did that get approved?
Because it's not currently in the.
It wasn't in the floodplain, right?
Oh, it wasn't in the.
Right.
It wasn't in the.
Still is not
Tom and I
technically,
conferred about
But
that.
it will be in the new map,
yes.
right?
But changing a number won't affect them.
No,
The only thing that would affect them is to either start new or raise the structure.
Well, it would affect them in the sense of what the trigger is. So if we stick with the FEMA minimum of 50% at that given moment, they could go through and fix, or they could, we're gonna renovate this unit. Okay, now next month, we're gonna renovate that one, now we're gonna renovate that one. And overall, they've spent 75% of the market value of that structure. But without that, at least
50, right.
2-year minimum of going back, we have to allow it. Now lowering it, again, that's just our recommendation to build more resiliency. I understand that they bought that property, they know it. It's just, we always strive, building codes, in my opinion, are not a political item, like a lot of times they are made out to be. It's about health, safety, and fire safety. This is a prime example of health and safety of the general public. Not only does it affect the people within the structure, but it also affects those outside of the structure. Whether it be during the event or after
Downstream.
and downstream.
Because it's.
You mentioned FEMA points, what would that, I mean, if we lowered to 45,
So,
what would that give us?
If we lower from 50 to 45, that would get us 5 points towards CRS. Now it's not official and I haven't done everything, but every time that we lower it, it gives us substantially more points. And we would be looking at our goal as a department, with it stands, or as it stands with this law, we would be looking at FEMA to provide our residents and our property owners with a minimum of 15% discount on their floodplain premiums.
So.
Now that's- Yep, so every time you go through, there's increments to get lower or higher and higher percentages. Currently, the city's at 10%. We, from my research, applied for it, we did not get it. Some other things with that, but we could go through and with what we have proposed, get 15%, is my opinion.
Which helps.
So that would have a direct effect on property owners.
Yep,
Their
no
flood
matter
insurance
if they had
would
flood
be
insurance.
That brings up my question. Of the structures that will now be in the new flood zone, what percentage have flood insurance that would be affected by this 15%?
Say that one more time, sorry.
the new flood zone.
There are a lot of folks that are in the flood zone that don't have flood insurance. I'm making that assumption.
Okay.
Do we know what that percentage is?
Uh,
And 15% of what's a flood premium? $1,000 for a
Will the bank loan you, can you have a mortgage and if you're in a floodplain, not have flood insurance?
so you cannot, underneath federal regulations, excuse me, have a federally backed mortgage without flood insurance if you're within the floodplain.
So you basically have to have flood
Have
insurance.
that if you have a mortgage, right?
wait a minute, is a, when you say federally backed, is that an arm's length mortgage at Canandaigua National, or is this some federal agency?
Canada National is FDIC insurance, so they're
Anybody that-
covered.
Okay, so it's federal.
Yeah, it's-
Okay.
Basically, you can't have.
Now the other statement with that or section, excuse me, is if you have ever or plan to ever accept any money from the federal government. Now, that is also emergency assistance. It's kind of a way to really in.
Everybody's in.
Everyone's in.
Up to the fact.
You have to carry insurance. on the
For
property.
free lunch.
So for instance, after July 9th, a lot of people took the, I think it was $10,000 emergency assistance from FEMA.
So it's in.
They went through and they got, okay, you can have this, but now you need to carry flood insurance, and if at any time you don't, you need to go through and pay back that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if we went to 45%, it would have a bigger impact on everyone in the floodplain than if we stayed at 50%. Because everyone would get a reduction on their flood insurance.
If they had it.
Well, no,
That was
they're,
my question.
unless if they have a mortgage, they're gonna have to have it. I would guess that,
Half those folks on the lake don't have a mortgage.
I don't know that.
I would,
That's,
I
if
would-
you're buying a house for $5 million, you probably don't have a mortgage.
probably more than half don't have a mortgage. They may need.
You're right.
Yeah.
Flood insurance. It would have. You could afford it.
It would have a very positive impact. I mean, even if you don't have a mortgage and you have a $5 million house and it's in a floodplain, I think you'd be crazy not to have flood insurance.
So here's the other question too, though, when they do have flood insurance and something happens and their garage floats away into the water, doesn't the flood insurance, would they also be reimbursing for any activities that the town or anyone did to help repair after that? Or clean up after that? Wouldn't they be?
Not unless federally declared disaster
Okay.
zones. So which we've seen 3 times now in Ontario County.
Two last, yeah, we met her at least twice. Yeah. And one before.
If you.
So maybe we should just do a straw poll of the town board members. Raise your hand if you want to stay at 50%. Thank you.
I counted 3.
If you don't. And if you don't want it.
So to give you guys just a quick recap, these are.
However, I
numbers-
would like the 50% for the 2 years. That, no, that,
I got
I mean, that's. That.
And that helps us because then we don't have to.
I don't know
compliance
about you
with
two.
council. But sorry, I just found it and to kind of give you guys a quick look at the insurance. I'm gonna send this to Kim. Real quick.
So we have a draft that we have to have a public hearing on this, right? So we could have a public hearing on this. We could announce and have a public hearing at the next town board meeting in November
November.
And then have a vote in December,
and vote in December.
depending on what you want to do, because. The vote will change. and-
You know, we'll throw it up there. These numbers are from December 2nd of 2023. I haven't been able to get updated numbers because FEMA doesn't trust us with them right now. I have to sign a whole bunch of documents. I just haven't been able to.
Updated numbers about what?
Flood insurance policies. So these are,
Can you zoom that in a little bit, Kim? I'm sorry.
Is there a spot that,
so right now in the town of Canandaigua, we have 43 total insurance policies. And these are NFIP policies within the floodplains. This doesn't cover.
the
outside.
current floodplain?
The current,
Right,
yeah, as of
right,
December 2nd, 23. They're currently paid just under $40,000 in premiums and carry just over $12,000 in insurance, or $12 million, excuse me. Of that, it's 1 manufactured home. 8 of them are within A zone minuses.
What is that?
That's, you're at risk, but you're really not.
Okay.
Okay. 38 of them are single family homes. 1 is a 2 to 4 family home. 4 of them are non-residential. All of them are non-condos. And the biggest one is all the way at the bottom, which is the community repetitive loss. These are the ones that threshold would target and why we're trying to go towards at least a 2-year backtrack. So these are policies that have requested coverage more than 3 times within a 10-year period. Okay,
Where are those?
I don't know, that's protected.
Okay.
Yeah. Insurance is a
Say
weird
3
thing.
times requested coverage, 3 times they've had a claim?
Yeah, 3 claims.
Yes, 3 claims within 10 years.
At least, now they don't have to be granted claims, and that's why I said requested.
Right.
So, and that again, I don't have.
So they've had some sort of flood damage 3 times.
3 times.
So, and in total, they paid out $28,000 in coverage.
Total or per?
Total.
That doesn't sound like a lot of money for all the.
And that's because some of these don't get granted. Okay. So to be designated as a flood,
But that's where the rubber meets the road. 28 grand is not a big deal.
I think that probably tells you the cost of the homes, you know, what level the homes are at. 28 grand would be, you know,
It's
a
peanuts.
third of a kitchen on the lake, but it might be half a house off the lake, you know? So.
Again, it's small change. Come on.
But that's only what, 2 or 3 properties they're talking about.
this one is 5.
5, okay.
So out of those 5, one of them is insured building with 2 to 3 losses greater than the building's value. So they fall underneath this. Now again, that's something that's gotta be looked at, but
Solve that problem. The municipality.
And this is
just
also before.
condemn it and buy him a new house somewhere else.
I bet,
Might be cheaper.
I bet we know who that person is. If I had to gather a guess, I think we could guess who that is.
And like I said, we're working to get new numbers. It's just. You gotta sign basically your life away and your firstborn. So we're going through it.
No, I think that might be someone who's having a sewer issue with the town. A sewer issue would be my guess on that.
But I don't know if they're in a floodplain.
I bet that is, okay. Yeah.
So you don't need to be in a floodplain for the flood insurance.
Okay.
That's the good thing about us being an FIP and having these. Anyone in the town can have it. And we're actually trying to push it out a little bit more because. We have seen a lot, and flood insurance does cover up to $250,000 of building damage. And then up to $100,000 of content damage, and it's also. Policies are able to be generated for renters, and that's a big one not everyone knows about. So if you're renting a structure, a dwelling unit, you can get flood insurance. Now, you're not gonna be paying a lot, because you're not worried so much about the building, but that $100,000 of content.
I'll bet you there aren't 100 policies in the whole municipality. Renters insurance with things. There, I bet you there aren't 25. So it's a non-issue.
In the end, when the insurance guy comes around, that adjuster, try to screw you down at every nickel and dime, you're gonna get much.
So can we have a public hearing on this?
There's one other piece that we have to kind of clarify before that, and that is the critical structures. So the other section that we believe would require code council approval of our critical structures or critical facilities. Currently, the uniform code does not designate between critical facilities and any other structure. Meaning that critical facilities fall underneath just the standard non-residential building code. Okay. And so for us to single out critical facilities and make it more restrictive, we would have to seek New York State approval, just like with the lowering of the percentage threshold. We would like to see it, but we also know that if that's what's gonna hold up the passing of this local ordinance, we can build relationships with those facilities that are thinking of developing within these areas and be affected by it. To potentially look at other areas or subsequently build to higher thresholds.
What currently beyond Happiness House, what critical facilities do we have that are in the new flood?
RG&E substation, 46 and 10.
Okay.
There's a medical facility that was gonna go into one. When we first talked to them, they weren't sure about what they wanted to do in there. We kind of steered them away from anything that would be designated as a critical facility, such as surgical. Anything that's has to deal with surgical, even outpatient or inpatient.
Our veterinary or animal shelters are.
Animal shelters are covered underneath that. Anything that it's.
So now we have a proposed new animal shelter location. Is that in the floodplain?
I'm not sure. You know where it is?
So
Center-
why
center point.
wouldn't we want to have critical structures
That's predating your
adhere
time.
to this?
Why wouldn't we want critical?
Yes, I mean,
facilities
it
floodplains?
seems
No,
Pretty-
yeah.
Right,
Well,
it seems
that's-
pretty obvious.
That's what I'm
It
trying
does.
to confirm, because I know, so for example, the one I'm talking about is Happy Tales is proposing something that's on the corner of 332 and is that your keys? Your keys. So if that's a critical facility, I don't know if that's in the floodplain or not, so.
It
But
will
they
be a part of,
purchased, it would, I'm sorry,
it would be a part of.
it is in the new floodplain. Okay, so that's one that it would affect. Happiness House obviously would be. So what happens to Happiness House if we do that? What happens?
So Happiness House would still be, they'd basically be a pre-existing non-conforming.
Okay,
They would still fall underneath the thresholds. If they wanted to go through and do anything, they just have to build to the current requirements.
So if they built another building,
they-
right,
okay. So they built another building.
The
it has
whole
to be
goal
higher.
is to
Right.
strive to you coming in to say, hey, you've got risk here. You can build, but we really don't want you there. So you're either gonna build to this 3-foot threshold or go to a different location that's outside the thing.
So.
Thought it was a
the-
2-foot threshold.
Sorry, 2 foot.
So basically, if the Humane Society is building on that corner, this would require them to build it up at a higher level.
2 feet
before-
higher, right?
Raise the ground higher, the foundation higher, or what?
Either or.
Oh, okay.
The thing is that if you raise the ground higher, then you have to provide storage.
Mhm,
It's
yep.
basically,
Yep.
so.
Okay.
It's one of those where we're really trying to just gear and steer these critical facilities.
So it's not necessarily affecting the current structures as much as new builds in those locations. Or expansions.
New builds.
Yeah.
Just new builds,
Okay,
Why wouldn't we do it then?
because it would require code council approval. And if we're not gonna do
What you were talking about the last.
going to, yeah.
so if we're not gonna do
Dice when you
the
go to all the meetings.
plead our case and beg and ask for it,
Which
Maybe
would
it's
cost the
better to
town,
just-
the cost of the council.
it would cost a lot of
Time
time and
and-
finances from.
So maybe it's better to just draw all these people that.
If we're not gonna do
So-
anything more than the critical facilities, my recommendation would be to not include the critical facilities. That's to not incur more cost and time on the town for something that I believe we could just politely suggest looking at different locations. or
Some
different
regions.
applications. So,
Can we, we can't spot zone. I was just wondering if we could zone them to have higher, in those areas to have higher
we could
Foundations
look
or
at
something.
altering zoning, but I think it would be just too much.
complicated.
Yeah. It's because then you're defining it and everything else to then put it in there. Floodplain is nice because it's, although it seems very complicated, it's really simple.
It's just a map. If
Right.
you're in it, you're in it. If you're
Right.
not, you're not.
Exactly. Once you get into zoning, there's different applications.
So I guess I don't understand what critical structures. Why would, I mean, why don't we do this? Is this somehow tied to the 45% you're saying? The
No,
40
remember he was talking about it would have to go to Albany.
Yeah, no, I-
More.
right, I get all that.
Pay for
Right.
going through that process.
Or we could just pass it and wait till we get sued, right?
No. I've got too many licenses that we put on the line for that one. No, our recommendation would be that if we're not gonna do anything more restrictive, except for critical facilities, that we don't foresee it as being a major issue at this point to go through that added expenses. Although it's something we would love to see. I think we have the ability to create relationships, generate relationships with these proposed critical facilities to say, hey, you need to identify the risk, you need to build so that you're not a risk. And I think we could do.
So Happiness House wants to put another building out. We don't pass critical structures. They can do whatever they want. They can do it at the same level. And no matter what you say, they say, hey, I want to do it, they do it.
Still need the 2-foot.
Because now they're in the floodplain. They weren't in the floodplain when they built it,
Right.
and now they are.
So they would have to come up 2 feet. They would have to adhere to that.
Above the basement.
Right. Same thing with Happy Tales if they go out on.
Correct.
Yes.
So-
Topography and having tails is there, they could, without much modification, just build higher.
Oh, they are.
Stay with them.
Yeah, they have a lot.
So it sounds like we're not gonna include critical structures on it, we're gonna leave it at 50%. That's the,
That's
that's the opposite of the.
Cause the
board.
45 would also have to go through that additional, yeah,
Right.
so so what you're saying is that if we're gonna do it all at once or don't do it at all.
Yeah,
Got it.
correct.
Understood. So,
It's. To be fair, personally, it's too much for an expense and risk, because if DOS comes back and says, no, we're not gonna grant this to you, we're back at square one. As far as an option, so.
got it.
So, let's just do another little straw. So we have insurance, we have flood insurance, we have critical structures that would be included in the 45%. Please raise your hand if you'd like to leave it at 50%, leave everything the way it is. 1, 2, 3, so that's,
Although you,
Terry and I are the
I mean-
45 and critical structure.
I don't know what happens next year because it's not really a secret anymore that I am gone at the end of the year. So, I mean, you still need 3 to pass anything, so you still need to get one of them to go forwards.
I'd like to see this get through the,
Are we still good with the 2-year?
everyone's still good with 2 years?
Man,
I'm
I
good
don't know
with
how
2
you
years.
do.
2 year,
One.
and 2 year and 50.
So there's 3.
It's 250.
That doesn't need to go through the state, does it, with the 2 year?
No.
No, okay.
No, because it's not, there's no timeline cited within state documents, and so our opinion is that by us adding a timeline, we're not being more restrictive, it's.
Because they're essentially circumventing the law by doing it every
Right.
couple of months, yeah. Got it.
But we should have this ready to go for public hearing in November. Sounds good.
So anything else you guys want to go over from that 78? No, 15,000 word document. 78 page, 15,000 words.
Look how much more time you have now.
Yeah.
You're so,
Already.
you're so, now you don't have to do anything.
Chuck, you had some punctuation that you didn't like, or was that your question?
You'd be voting on it.
Yeah, there's a question mark.
There's a dangling participle.
So did everyone hear that? We could set. We could set the public hearing for the 18th and vote on it on the 25th.
Yeah, well,
You can set it.
the 18th, we could hold a public hearing on the 18th. We have a presentation that night.
You
we
can't,
don't-
you haven't set it yet.
We have to set it on the
Right.
18th for the 25th.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misspoke, so that we can vote on it in December.
Yeah, correct.
So is that, everyone? is
We can
agreeable
put
to
it on
that?
the agenda to set it on the 18th.
We have
Yeah,
a meeting on the 18th.
Yes.
Okay, I'll add that.
right, right.
So the new maps are currently in their 90-day appeal period, that ends January 1st. So once the appeals come through, and we've only had one appeal, which wasn't founded. They didn't have any information other than, I don't want to be in it. So once all the appeals go through FEMA and DEC, you'll have a 6-month window, so within the first 6 months. Yeah, and then this will come,
These regulations.
and then this will come back before you
For what?
in at that time to just update what names are.
But we wouldn't be voting until December anyway, right?
So if you're wanting public input, so.
Well, I mean, we've always done, in the past, we've done it where a public hearing and then we vote on it that same meeting, which we don't, just because we've done it, doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. Sometimes having a public hearing and then voting at the next meeting. It opens it up,
I just want clarification, so I know what that.
if we can get it to the planning board if we can get it to the planning board.
And we
In
can vote on
time
it on the 25th,
for
that's
the
fine.
25th, if we can't,
right?
then we do it December, it's
Right.
not, we can't.
Not until
cannot.
December.
Okay, then we'll do it during December, then we'll advertise the public hearing. At our second November meeting, and we'll advertise it for December.
And then vote on it in
Yeah,
December.
that's fine.
It is.
So
December meeting's the 16th because of
Right.
Christmas.
not to throw a wrench in that, but I do have to send this back out to FEMA and DEC. Now we've made changes again to get their approval. We'll outline the changes, but in case anything does come back with a timeout, let's relook at this. We maybe have.
So maybe it's better to go in December anyway. Yeah. So we would set the public hearing for the 16th and then vote on it the 16th
December.
of December.
Was this required planning?
Yes.
Oh,
And county planning has already looked at it. They had nothing more than punctuation review, so,
Officially?
not officially, Tom and Linda reviewed it. No, but that should at least help them
Speed up the
relay it
process.
to the county planning board, so.
They only have one meeting.
And then, again, just to go over it, DEC's reviewed it, FEMA's reviewed it, no issues there. Nadler's looked at it, Soil and Water has looked at it, Kevin Mulvaney's looked at it. The list can go on and on for who's looked at this. And everyone's been commending us as far as getting away from New York State's printed out law that everyone signed and having something that's more robust for the future, so.
All right, lots bisected by right of way. You didn't send me a draft. Now didn't send a draft. Where is Chris today? I thought he was gonna be.
I did forward down the code from Borum.
Saw Right.
Last meeting.
So Sarah, are you gonna talk to Chris or you want me to call him, say where is that? All right,
She already sent him everything. He has it.
then we're on to fire alarm.
All right. This is inside my email, this is the exact same law as we reviewed last meeting, with the exception of 77-5 and 77-6. Chris sent me back his comments. He has actually personally challenged a similar law in another municipality for other work. And so he really liked how their law was written and wanted me to basically rework ours to align with theirs, to limit any challenges from property owners. So we did that, and then grammatical errors were fixed. Updates were provided to Chief Magnera as well as Chief Brown, and they like it. They approved it. The only thing that we're still trying to work out as far as staff to go along with this will be process for notification to staff. It's just basically creating forms for the fire personnel to use. We don't foresee any challenges. We do have a great working relationship with both fire departments, so should be all set.
And it's mainly affecting commercial properties.
Summarize for me what this proposed legislation does.
So this is a piece of ordinance to fill in a blank spot that we have within the town. Currently, there is no ordinance for multiple false alarms within the town for firearms. Just this summer, we had 3 commercial establishments that accounted for nearly 100 emergency responses, where the only issue was alarm based. There was no true emergency. And it was very difficult for our department as well as the fire departments to work with the companies responsible for the structures to get everything fixed. There is no code within New York State for false alarms or alarm malfunctions other than it needs to be inspected and maintained properly, which in order to do that, it's about a 3 to 4 month process. And we just can't have that many emergency responses going in there. So this piece of ordinance will allow us to, after 3 false alarms that are deemed to be what as we define as false alarms, to create a civil action within the town, just as we do appearance tickets, to have them remedied quicker.
3 false alarms within what period of time?
That is within 1 year, I believe. Let me just double check. Yep, within 1 calendar year.
Thank you.
So, and just for reference, we have it listed out. third avoidable alarm within 1 year is $200. Then they go up incrementally until 5, and then from 5 on, it's $500 per.
So they get 2 free every calendar year. Seems reasonable to fix their system.
This isn't so much my previous experience with the fire department I used to be in. We only used this a handful of times, and it was when we were getting pushback from the property owner or property manager. This is really a, hey, listen, we've talked to you now 5 times. You've met this threshold already. We get this fixed, otherwise I need your name to be averted for an appearance ticket. And we're
Last month.
gonna go through.
Right.
So some other things that are in here are items the fire departments have asked for, such as having properly maintained contact numbers for those responsible. So that we can keep our contact lists up to date at the 911 center. Other items such as how to inspect the systems and provide those reports to us, both the fire department, so that they have them readily available.
Makes a lot of sense.
So it's a lot of sense.
So do we need a public hearing on that one too then?
We do, so we can set the public hearing on this one on the 15th.
Well, why not just do them for December?
Do both.
We'll just put them all in December. That way we don't have to, because the first meeting in November is just, I mean.
All right.
So we'll put them on the November calendar. The second November board meeting, we'll have the public hearings in December and we'll have resolutions. in
Sounds
December.
good. So that's December 16th.
And we do have a third one that was missed on the agenda, that's the unsafe structures, or the buildings property maintenance. So that'll be another one.
Talking about Mike Murphy meeting.
It's like Murphy night.
Is that buildings and property maintenance? Is that unsafe structures?
Yeah, we're changing the title. So we're revising chapter 88 to align with a more streamlined process, as well as incorporate what is called a vacant building registry. Basically, if any building is vacant for more than 90 days or commercial space, that property owner or property management company has to register that space with the town. Good for many reasons. Number one is property maintenance gets neglected with a lot of these vacant buildings, so now we'll just have a person to tie to said building. We have one on County Road 16. It's been vacant for many years. Every single year, we send out appearance tickets, and legal paperwork just to get them on mode. Whereas with this, we'll have someone that we can truly call. We'll keep that list up to date, and we'll work with them to have a plan for maintenance. Besides that, the unsafe buildings portion is really just changing procedure from what we currently have, which is a very long, drawn out process, to something that's very simple. In my opinion, we're still having it, the power rests with the town board for declaration of an unsafe structure, with all of our investigative reports sent to you guys. Reason for that is having a public hearing is required for condemnation. And should the property owner fail to remedy the unsafe structure, the town will incur the cost of that. That public hearing helps us to put it back on the tax roll. So, really just a lot of procedure changes and the addition of vacant. So yeah, same as last meeting, it's just the others finally reviewed it. We did go through and alter just a few items. Mainly the notice, providing notice. So everyone now will be noticed through certified mail. Whereas before it was just first class registered mail. We really see the benefit of having certified mail. So we changed it so that any notice of violation of local remedy that we send out will be. So we get proper.
December 16th for the public hearing, Garish.
It'll be a fun meeting. We'll have Secret Santa, we'll have like gifts, we'll have carols, we'll have public hearings.
You'll have a
Well-
giant presentation of a resolution for me, right?
I'd just like to say thanks to Mike for doing all the hard work.
Yeah.
It's really bringing stuff up to getting us into a usable situation for some uncomfortable situations. So thank you.
One quick note is fee schedule. Do you want that just for January meeting?
Fee schedule.
Sorry.
Any changes to the fee schedule would be approved in January, if you can get them to us beforehand, so we can look like a red line version with any of the changes.
There's just within the floodplain ordinance and all of these proposed,
Yep.
there will be changes, so we'll hold off on anything.
Yeah, that way we do it
Anything
once,
that's in
we do it all once in January, and then we only have to fix it like 5 more times during the year versus 7 or what we normally do.
So
Always the
your fee
goal.
schedule is just the fines that are associated with each.
Always the goal.
Yeah, and then some stuff from that chapter 92 revision that we did that we've been pulling off on, like food trucks.
Yes,
We passed chapter 92 after food truck season was kind of over.
Yeah.
yeah,
So we didn't want to just update the fee schedule for that, so you'll see some changes.
good.
Then just while I got the floor, I'm really sorry, just one last thing. I included it in my email, I'm kind of just asking for help from the town board as well as the committee and reaching out to New York State. The new code, although they wanted it in the first quarter for adoption. After talking with New York State forever, it seems like, and back and forth, they're kind of now realizing that's not gonna happen until the second or third quarter. New York State DOS does not have enough staff to create new trainings for us, so they're slowly pushing it off. With that said, the executive law for fossil fuels and the banning of such within new structures has kind of progressed to the point where it will become effective December 31st, 2025. There wasn't a case within the appellate court going through that started early 2023 that has since been dismissed by the appellate court. So unless a new legal venture starts from our gas companies and builders, which I do foresee happening, New York State has told us that will be effective. Although they keep telling us it's going to be effective, every time I contact DOS, they have no training, they have no information other than the literal writing of the law, which even Chris Nadler tries to read. It makes no sense.
So this is a little aside, but how does this affect some of these building projects that are going on? Are they trying to get gas? I'm sure,
That's our question,
right,
that we're trying to get
Right.
answered.
They're trying to push them to electric only.
right,
That's not gonna stop them from making an effect. They,
No.
they still haven't implemented everything they were supposed to have done in the, raise the age laws that are now 6, 7 years old. There's still no training or anything in those.
Yeah, and that's really, I'm just kind of hoping for some push from,
So how can we help? Would that be a letter from the board? Would that be a resolution from the board? I'm fine getting
Yeah.
the county involved as well. We could put a resolution in December from
Saying
the
what?
board.
yeah, what are you asking for?
I mean,
can you get some training or explanation on this?
training, requesting New York State for trade, first of all, I mean, I'd love a resolution saying this law is misguided and is only
Yes,
gonna
I'd like
damage.
that, I'm for that,
I would too.
I'm for
I
that
do.
resolution.
And then likewise, and additionally, you know, number one, the law is misguided and will have negative impact on the desire for affordable housing throughout New York State. And Western New York, which is one of the greenest parts of New York State as far as the energy we receive, by the way.
Yep,
Um,
92%.
and then also the fact that this law is being pushed forward with no training, and if this law is put into place, our code enforcement and development office has no training on how this is to be implemented.
Well, I think you should also put in it specifically, you know, we currently have a project with over 600, whatever units it is, approved, you know, going through the approvals process in the town that will probably start building somewhere close to when this deadline is set. We need to be able to inform them and tell them what fuel use they can expect for their buildings, so, and it's not allowing our housing development, our pro-housing community to be pro-housing, whatever you want to call it. So,
Well, beyond that, we've also heard from Brian Davis at our last LDC meeting that
yeah, the
our
Olympics.
G&E says they don't have enough power
Exactly,
to commit to electrically heating.
it within our county, yeah.
I don't even
Can't
think they're
get
talking,
gas, wait, supposed to use wood? Oh,
I-
no. can't use that either.
I don't even think they're talking about electrical heating, I think they're just talking about electrical services to these houses, I don't think they
They're-
even brought up.
No, they're talking about straight up can't use natural gas to heat your home
No, I
as of the end of this year.
understand that, but but RG,
Yeah.
RGE is saying they don't have the electric
Service.
grid to provide.
They don't have electric to provide electricity, let alone enough to heat all these
To heat
homes.
houses, right, that's what I'm saying,
And to provide electric chargers for all
Right.
these homes.
that's what I'm
And the
saying.
potential for them.
2 cars being charged in the same garage in Henrietta knocked out the whole grid, so. This is something that's, you know.
Sure can't be both of these.
Yeah.
So so what I'm putting down is in opposition to the premise of the law in general. The concern number 2, that RG&E can't provide enough electric for the new homes. Just enough electric to provide the electric for those homes. Lack of training, anything else?
And pro-housing comments.
And I would justify that with the growth development that we have, it's gonna be affected with. No explanation or reasoning on how they're gonna be affected.
We should include that amount of generators.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
yeah.
generators are exempt.
Well,
You're gonna need.
Housing.
I think we can all just use generators for our houses, period.
Just show the current.
Stupid. Generators for houses and generators for our electric cars
I guess
have to
people
be
meeting to
charged with generators.
So yeah, sorry to open up Pandora's box with that.
No,
It's
it's
No, that's.
Dave Krista is really, I mean, every time I drive down Poplar, he's outside talking to me, he's, how is this gonna affect? I don't know.
no one else.
I truthfully need answers, cause we have about 1,000 dwelling units, and I don't know how they're gonna be.
Well, I mean, we have to voice our objections.
Well,
to
this
the law,
will,
John.
yeah, and this will be, and we can,
We should reach out to neighboring counties.
we
that are-
can do this as a town. I can get this on the county agenda in January and we can get it through committee and get it passed. Typically, the county doesn't make stances on things like that, but I think now going forward, we'll probably be able to. So let's. Now, is it gonna do anything? It'll at least get our voices heard, so
I
we'll
mean, you
start
might,
there and try to get the county to do something.
you might also inform, once we get it written out, you might share it with
Share. with
counties
Claudia.
with similar, no, it's not gonna be Claudia, it's gonna be.
No, but
it's
she
gonna be
can,
The other 2, but.
she can get the bully pulpit going too.
But you could also share it with other counties
Mm-hmm.
and say, this is a resolution we passed, if any other counties
Yeah,
are
why don't-
similar,
I know how to.
you know, like
Yeah,
Sarah County,
we always
you
do
know.
that with any that go out. They get shared out.
All right, any other issues? We're still working on form based.
Yeah,
Well, I do think one thing we could talk about is creating a team. I think that's.
well, we have a meeting today. I asked John to sit in, John Square and I. We're gonna start looking at it. Come up with some ideas and then bring it back to this group.
I'm happy to be part of that as well.
Yeah, so we'll bring it back to this group and then we'll figure out where we are. And have those discussions.
Is
on
that
it.
something that we should consider including in our planner as well?
Well, this is, eventually, yes, this is
The
just,
first pass out.
this is the first pass to think of thoughts and ideas. To bring up concerns that we had, just brainstorming. And then take that next step. Can't have 3 board members, because then it would be a public meeting. And then we'd have to move on out.
My concern with that group is I have some positive feelings about form-based code. That group, I don't think includes anyone who has positive feelings about form-based code.
Can't you solve the public meeting issue, just do a quick notice? That there might be more than 3.
Just put it online right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
So isn't it easily solvable?
No.
Okay.
no, because then we'd have to have it, then we're recording it, then we're zooming it. Then we're doing those other things.
You don't have to zoom them. but
Yeah.
You have
But-
to advertise.
Well, I think, I still think it's a good idea.
This will not be decision making.
Exactly.
There will be no decision making. It's just
Let's get some ideas on
Get
the
some
table.
ideas and
We
get
actually
that.
really need discussion points.
Yeah.
So that's really what we need, so. All right, next meeting is December 2nd.
before we go, I do want to have a quick executive session, if that's okay. Does anybody have anything right after? Adeline,
It's okay.
Dave, John, you're good? Okay.
Did you notice,
December 2nd, 9 AM.
did you notice that executive session?
On where, did I?
My point,
You're just,
who the hell
no,
is gonna know?
I know. Well, all it takes is.
So just a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we
Motion to
enter executive
Oh,
session.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And we will, yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Right.